Thank you all for joining us here at I-80 Sports, where today we continue our 32-part 2021 team previews. Tonight's team, the Buffalo Sabres. Thank you all for joining us here again at I-80 Sports. Thank you all for joining us here again at I-80 Sports. Make sure you check out our website down below, i80sports.com, for all of our team previews coming up. We're almost all the way through the Atlantic Division. We've already covered the Central and the Pacific Division. So if you've got favorite teams in those divisions, make sure you check them out. Starting next week, we will be moving on to our final division, the Metropolitan Division. So anybody here on the East Coast, don't worry, your favorite team is coming up quite soon. Make sure you're along the ride. And if you're here on YouTube, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe for all of our team previews, because we're previewing all 32 teams before the beginning of the NHL season in October. And if you're on Twitter, make sure that you follow us down below at I80_SportsNHL. And if you're already currently following, thank you guys so much, because without your support, we can't do this on a weekly basis. I'm Brian. He's Tom. Tom, how are you doing today?
Doing well, and here we are to preview the Buffalo Sabres.
Yeah, not much else.
Unfortunately, I don't really have anything to say. I'm just saying Buffalo Sabres.
This is true. But we've got a special guest here tonight from the FrozenFourPodcast. We've got our buddy Luke down below us right here. Luke, why don't you tell us a little bit about Frozen 4 and where we can find you guys?
Yeah, so I am the host of the Frozen 4 podcast that we started as just a Buffalo Sabres podcast and a little bit of Leafs mixed in here and there. And, you know, we've branched out, got in touch with a Facebook group called NHL News Updates, and now we do NHL news all across the league. So you can find us on every streaming platform except for YouTube. We don't do video. Sorry for those that would rather listen to that, but we don't have the faces for it.
I mean, neither do we, but yep, here we are. But, guys, make sure you check out Frozen 4 Podcast. You can check them out on Twitter. What's your Twitter handle, Luke?
Our Twitter handle is at FrozenFourPod. Definitely check us out there. I run the Twitter, so it's always a fun time.
Heck yeah. So I understand that. But let's talk about some Buffalo Sabres. Let's all be sad together right now. We're going to dive head first, just like we're diving head first into a bottom of a waterless pool. And away we go. So 2020 and 2021 team facts. How did the Buffalo Sabres end last year? Well, not so good. They were 15, 34, and 7. That's 15 wins to 34 losses to 7 overtime losses. That's good for 37 points, and they finished 8th in the East Division last year. Power play and penalty kill stats. Power play actually kind of surprising, not horrible. They were sitting at around 21% on the power play, which is about 2 ticks above league average at 19%. Penalty kill, a bit of a different story. They were actually 2 ticks below league average, sitting around like 77.7% on the penalty kill. Could get better this year, might stay the same. We'll just have to see. Leading scorers on the Buffalo Sabres, we have former Buffalo Sabre Sam Reinhart with 40 points. He is now a member of the Florida Panthers. Sorry, Luke. And then we also had Victor Olofsson with 32 points. And lastly, Rasmus Dahlin with 21 points, the former number 1 overall pick. Next, we're moving on to some key additions and subtractions on this Buffalo Sabres team. So who came over? Who went away? So additions, we had Robert Haig, Devin Levi, Will Butcher, Craig Anderson, Aaron Dell, John Hayden, Vinny Hinostroza, Sean Malone, Ethan Pratt, Mark Pysyk, Jimmy Schultz, and Ryan McInnes. Couple interesting names in there, namely Robert Haig, Will Butcher, Craig Anderson, and Aaron Dell, as namely some interesting names to me that I think could be featured in this lineup, quite heavily. Some subtractions, we actually had some really interesting subtractions here. Rasmus Ristolainen, Sam Reinhart, William Borgen, who was lost at the expansion draft. He is now a member of the Seattle Kraken. John Sebastian D, Matt Irwin, Stephen Fogarty, Carter Hutton, Jake McCabe, CJ Smith, Linus Olmark, and Riley Sheehan. Pretty interesting to note here. It's a full changing of the guard in net. No more Carter Hutton and Linus Olmark. It is officially being turned over to Craig Anderson and Aaron Dell this year. Important to note there. Next, it's time to talk about some X factors. And no, we're not talking about NHL 22 X factors. We're talking about our own brand of X factors here. Who is pivotal to Buffalo's success this year? Tom, as per usual, I've done enough talking at this point. I got to hear from you and Luke. Tom, let's start with you. Who are some X factors on the Buffalo Sabres this year?
Well, I mean, I don't even know where to begin with this one. From the top down, this organization is just in pieces. And remember last year when we were doing our previews, we were really talking the Sabres up. They had brought in Taylor Hall. They had brought in Mark Stoll. You had Rasmus Dahlin on your back line there. It looked like on paper that this team was finally ready to take that next step, become a playoff team, go into Eichel's prime as like a contender. And it just didn't happen, and I have no idea why. But I hate to say this team is in pieces. I guess the age-old adage here is that everyone is counting them out. It's like that movie Major League. It's like kind of back in 05, and I hate to use this reference, but I remember in 05, Sports Illustrated picked the Rangers to be the worst team in the league. Jaromir Jagr took that article, posted it on the chalkboard, and they had their best season in years. So maybe, just maybe, with all this negative attention they're getting from the media and getting from this Jack Eichel situation, we know right now Eichel is no more. He showed up to training camp. He failed his physical. He was stripped of his captaincy, and he was sent back home to Boston. So maybe, just maybe, with this negative Eichel situation, with this negative overall situation, these guys will lean on each other. They'll know what their jobs are. They'll know what their roles are, and maybe they'll just come out and surprise everybody. You never know. It's happened before. And maybe, just maybe, this is what will drive the team, is all this negative attention. You never know.
Anything can happen, and stranger things have happened. Luke, let's turn to you here. Who do you think are some X factors on the Buffalo Sabres this year?
Yeah, most definitely. You never know what's going to happen. Biggest X factor I see are two guys, one being Dylan Cousins, depending on what he does as he gets into his second season, gets into a full swing of things, and Casey Middlestat. We saw under Donnie Granato last year, he had 17 points in 22 games to end the season when Granato took over. We have to see now, okay, is he maybe ready for that second-line center role? That's the big question right now. He's going to be playing that. Cousins pretty much locked up first-line center just because we have no one else. But
yeah, I agree. I mean, that being said, I wouldn't be surprised if Casey Middlestat actually gets first-line minutes, at least to start off the season, just because Dylan Cousins hasn't really played enough games to kind of be that de facto number one just yet. Maybe he takes it over officially, maybe after the first couple weeks. But I actually do think Middlestat might just earn that shot as the number one center, at least to start this season. But I think Middlestat is absolutely a good choice. Do you want to elaborate a little bit more on Middlestat there, or?
I think it's going to be a rotating cast of that top six, just because you also have Arttu Ruotsalainen, who's unproven but is getting reps at training camp at center. So maybe you see him fight Middlestat and Cousins for some more minutes, and even Rasmus Asplund has played center a lot too, so he's going to be fighting for those minutes as well. He looked really good come the end of last season. So it's gonna be a fun year, maybe. A lot of young guys coming up.
Yeah, and there are a couple players to be excited about here. I mean, for me, just from being the outside looking in, it's really tough to pick an X factor when it's obvious and blatant that the organization currently doesn't really care about winning at all at the moment. I mean, from the outside looking in. So for now, I'll throw out two promising names that I think are automatic names: Victor Olofsson and former number one overall pick Rasmus Dahlin. With 74 points in 110 games, Victor Olofsson is a very good forward, and you can kind of think of him as a big fish in a small pond right now. I mean, he's the de facto superstar on this team. Rasmus Dahlin, on the other hand, just got a bridge deal for the next 3 seasons, and he got that bridge deal because he had 3 decent opening seasons. He's only getting a bridge deal right now because of the decrease in productivity last year. Now, I personally think it's just because he was playing on a slightly, underperforming Buffalo Sabres team. But he's a very interesting player to watch on a team with not much else to be interested in. And I do think that Dahlin does get locked up later on. Luke, did you want to add on top?
Yeah, that's the question mark everyone's having. Like, oh, another bridge deal. Like, come on, we're sick of these. it's been happening. We saw Reinhart leave to it. Could it have been Dahlin being like, hey, I know that I'm a good player. I can make a lot of money in a couple of years if I'm staying on a bridge deal.
It could happen.
What if we do that? And he's like, I don't know where the Sabres are going to be at. Who knows if we actually take a step or we fall back again? He might not want to be here. It might be another Eichel Reinhart situation.
This is a sad but true scenario right now with the Buffalo Sabres, especially when you have a family like the Pagulas that own the Buffalo Sabres at the moment. It's unpredictable. It's unpredictable in the not so good way in this case. But we're going to move on from X Factors here. We're going to talk about some breakout candidates. Who are some players that are in line for maybe a career year this year, maybe coming into their rookie year, haven't had a big year yet, or maybe they're just finally due for that breakout season. Tom, let's start with you. Who's your breakout candidate on the Buffalo Sabres?
Well, I guess I'm going with a little bit of an obvious choice here. It's Dylan Cousins. He only had 13 points in 41 games last year, which it's not that impressive. But this year, in a year where his role is pretty much defined, he's going to be guaranteed those top 6 minutes. The hope is that he'll take that role and he'll take that more playing time. I'm sorry, I can't speak English today. More playing time, and he'll build on it. And he'll become the player that everyone thought he was when they drafted him. I was very high on Dylan Cousins back in 2019. Me and Brian and Luke here, we were talking about this before we logged on tonight. I watched Dylan Cousins a lot in 2019 in the hope that the Rangers would draft him. Obviously, Capo Caco fell into their hands. But I was very, very big on Dylan Cousins, and I still think he's got a lot to prove, and I still think he'd become a very good player. So we'll see what happens this year with the increased role and the increased playing time.
Yeah, absolutely. Luke, who's your breakout candidate for the Buffalo Sabres?
Looking over the Sabres roster, it's hard to really pick out that one person for multiple reasons. One, you never know who it's going to be because it's probably going to end up being a different person each night who has a really good game, and then a person that's been doing good has a really crap game. They're just not on the same level. I'm really pushing to an Arttu Ruotsalainen.
Okay.
He came on last year, played a few games, looked really good. Hasn't really had that opportunity yet to play in the NHL. With Donnie Granato saying he is coming in, he is going to be a center fighting for third-line minutes, I'm thinking, okay, we saw the promise he had. He played very well in the A. There's potential that Arttu can maybe have a breakout year this year. It's going to be between him and Asplund, in my opinion.
Yeah, I think Arttu Ruotsalainen is a very popular choice in this position. The other popular choice here is the one that I'm going to agree with Tom on here, and I think it's Dylan Cousins. I think Cousins is an exciting young prospect who has grown into his body very well. That was the main reason why he didn't go higher a couple of years ago in the draft. He was very underweight for his size, but now that he's added size to his already very good frame and hasn't lost any speed because of that, he's going to be getting top 6 minutes for this team consistently. And if he gets consistent top 6 minutes, Cousins could produce some high point numbers, especially if he ends up playing on a line with the likes of Victor Olofsson. I think that could be really, really exciting to see what kind of dynamic the two of them have on the top line. It could mean the difference between, Buffalo maybe finishing, towards the bottom of the pack or maybe even towards maybe a little bit further up. Again, stranger things have happened. But we're going to move on. We're going to talk about what the potential opening night lineup could look like for the Buffalo Sabres. We have to say this now, though. It is currently the beginning and opening of training camp right now. There are ways that this lineup could change between now and the beginning of the NHL season in October. We've still got a little bit of time. So, of course, as always, guys, make sure that you take this with a grain of salt, as always. But let's take a look at what this opening night lineup could look like in October. So with that being said, let's start with forward line one as always. So we're looking at the top line. We're moving from left wing to center to right wing. First line, we've got Jeff Skinner with Casey Middlestat and Victor Olofsson. Next on the second line, we've got Anders Bjork with Dylan Cousins and Tage Thompson. It was kind of difficult not to mention Tage Thompson as a potential breakout candidate. But that being said, I do believe he is a player that could have a breakout and career year this year, especially in top 6 minutes. And as I mentioned before with Dylan Cousins, would not be the least bit surprised if he starts off on the first line. I just gave Casey Middlestat the benefit of the doubt because I really liked this development last year. And Third line, we've got Arttu Ruotsalainen with Rasmus Asplund and Vinny Hinostroza. And then on the fourth line, Zemgus Girgensson with Cody Eakin and Drake Caggiula. Next, moving on to the first line of defense, we've got Rasmus Dahlin with Henry Jokiharju. Joker was another person that I thought of maybe as that breakout role, but it was kind of tough to pick defense in this case. Next, moving on to the second line of defense, we've got Robert Haig with Colin Miller. And then lastly on the third line, former Devils defenseman Will Butcher with Mark Pysyk. And then lastly, the goaltending. I made it a 1A, 1B situation because it could go either which way, honestly. It could be a 50-50 split between both of these goaltenders. But goalie 1A, Craig Anderson, with goalie 1B, Aaron Dell. So, interesting lineup that Buffalo is pumping out there this year. It's an interesting lineup, to say the least. But that being said, there are some variables that we need to talk about with this lineup because there are some ways that this Buffalo lineup could change between now and the beginning of the season. There are ways that it can change from opening night to the Olympic break and then the Olympic break till after the trade deadline. So that being said, Tom, we'll start with you. What are some variables to this Buffalo lineup this year?
Well, I guess the biggest elephant in the room is the one that's been surrounding them for the longest time now, this Jack Eichel situation. We know as of today he will not be there. He was sent home. But this King's ransom angle that Kevin Adams is pushing is only going to hurt Eichel and the team even more. I think it's getting to the point now where other GMs are not even trying anymore to contact Adams to get a deal done because I think he's still pushing and pushing and pushing for an unrealistic return. The further it drags out, it's just not going to help. This kind of reminded me of the Mark Messier situation way back in 1991 where Mark Messier had pretty much gone out and won the Canada Cup by himself after Wayne Gretzky got hurt. And then instead of going to training camp with the Oilers, just straight out went home and waited for Glenn Sader to call him and tell him he was traded somewhere. But you know what? That's what I thought would happen with this. I thought Eichel just wouldn't go to camp. They'd hammer it out beforehand. He'd be at a new address by now, and it's still not that way. So this kind of reminds me a little bit more of that Eric Lindros situation from 20 or so years ago, where Lindros held out in Philly for a whole year, and Bobby Clark refused to trade him. At the end of the day, that Lindros deal that he got didn't really net a great return. It netted Pavel Brendel, who was a good player coming up, but felt the need to eat hot dogs and drink beer over the summer instead of actually seriously training to be a hockey player. It got him Kim Janssen, who was decent for the Flyers, and it got him Jan Hlavich, who was so-so. And I feel like if Adams drags this out more and more and more, that the return that's going to come back to Buffalo is not going to make these Sabres fans very, very happy. So in my opinion, I think that Adams really needs to figure out what he's doing with this and needs to figure it out soon because I hate to sound like a broken record yet again, but the more this drags out, the more it's going to wind up hurting the Sabres. It's going to hurt Eichel too, but I think at the end of the day, it's going to hurt the Sabres more than it hurts Jack Eichel. Another variable here is Jack Quinn, who they drafted last year. Played in the AHL last year, 9 points in 15 games, which if you equate that out, that's about 50 points. That's not too bad. If he comes up this year to the Sabres, will he get 50 points? I'm not sure, maybe not, but say he, gets 40 to 45 or they start playing him in the top six role and they go, oh, what the hell? If he gets 50 points this year, that's good on the Sabres for drafting him. So curious to see what happens with him as well.
Definitely. Luke, on your side, what are some variables to this Buffalo lineup this year?
So honestly, looking at the lines that you said too, I don't fully even agree with those. Cody Eakin has already said he's probably not going to be in the lineup. He's going to be the extra skater. They're going to play Okposo over him and have Zemgus at center for that fourth line. There's no doubt in my mind over that one. And then defensively, variables is going to be Samuelson and Laxinen coming up from the A. They're going to probably see some playing time. So will Jacob Bryson. I think Jacob Bryson is on opening night roster playing with Colin Miller instead of Robert Hagg. The biggest variable you're going to see, though, is within the Sabres' bottom two middle six, and that's going to be, does Brett Murray make the lineup? He's been playing very well in the Prospects Challenge, looking like a man amongst boys. Does he make the lineup this season? Do you see JJ Peterka, who's been doing much, much better than Jack Quinn has? I don't think you see Jack Quinn much this season. I think he has another year in the A. See what he can do, see what he's ready for. I think you see JJ Peterka come the Olympics right either before or after it due to injury / hey, we're doing really bad. Let's just give all these rookies a chance to play. And then lastly, one of the other biggest variables, Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen. Does he get playing time? He's looked decent throughout this prospect challenge. Hasn't looked amazing, but has looked pretty decent. So does he get NHL playing time? And I think he does. I think we start with 3 goalies in the NHL this year.
I think that's something that could easily happen, especially because you look at the goaltending. You've got Craig Anderson. You've got Aaron Dell. Both guys are, they're not in their 20s anymore. They're not, the younger goaltenders and stud goaltenders that they used to be. These are guys that were kind of bargain bin, goaltenders that are coming off of, down years in general. Aaron Dell had a down year with the Devils this past year. He came in during a time when Mackenzie Blackwood was still dealing with COVID, and Dell didn't really look good. Scott Wedgwood got the majority of the time over him because of that. I could easily see Buffalo running 3 goalies, especially because Craig Anderson might not stay healthy. Dell might not stay healthy. Pushing 3 goaltenders, if Luukkonen is ready for those minutes, could be a really good situation. Just don't pull a Cam Talbot in Edmonton and, give him 57 games right from the get-go. And, good things can happen. I definitely agree. I think JJ Peterka could, be, coming up before Jack Quinn. Jack Quinn might need a little bit more time to kind of fester in the AHL, build some size. Before coming over to the AHL, he did have a good steady development with the Ottawa 67s. That is before COVID hit. And he was kind of thrusted into the American Hockey League because of that. And it's just going to need more time to develop, fill into his body a little bit more. With a player like him, drafting a guy number 9 overall, you don't want to rush the development of a player. You don't want to, completely rush him up if he's not ready for those minutes. If Buffalo can do one thing right this year is not rush the development of their top prospects. That's the biggest thing that they've got going for them. And then lastly, it's, when is this saga finally going to be over with Jack Eichel? Like, the sooner that it gets finished, the better, because, you had Jack Eichel that was sent home today, like the beginning of training camp, failed his physical, which obviously he was going to fail his physical. There was no doubt about that. Buffalo, for whatever reason, refuses to allow him to get a disc replacement surgery, which has been proven to be more successful than a fusion surgery. I don't understand Buffalo's point of view with this. And it's a mess. They're not allowing the player to do what he feels is best for his body. They're ruining his prime years at the moment. And even worse, that they're dragging the fans along with this. Fans are not going to want to come and watch a Buffalo team where, the Pegula family obviously doesn't care about the Buffalo Sabres. They care more about the Buffalo Bills right now. And it shows. So that being said, the Pegulas need to stop micromanaging this team and organization. They don't micromanage the Buffalo Bills, and look at how the Buffalo Bills are doing. They're flourishing because of that. Just set it and forget it with the Buffalo Sabres. This was a team that was so close and on the cusp of being a dangerous team last year, and they blew it up like dynamite because of micromanaging. So that being said, hold a silent auction of sorts. You're going to have teams that are just sick of it at this point, but sell to the highest bidder at this point. Hold a silent auction, get that king's ransom that you want, and move on. The sooner this happens, the better it is for the team, for the team's morale, for the organization's morale, for the city of Buffalo and its fans. I cannot stress this enough. But I just feel like this is only the beginning, unfortunately, and that's the thing that sucks. That's the thing that really sucks for Buffalo fans in general. Like, this shouldn't be dragging on like this.
Honestly, at this point, I've stopped listening. I've stopped caring about the Eichel debacle. Like, he'll get traded at some point. I know he will. He's never gonna play a game for the Sabres again.
No.
It reminds me of kind of when Rick Nash was being shipped out of Columbus in 2012. At first, Scott Houseman was asking for the moon and Jupiter and Mars for Rick Nash, and eventually he had to back off. I just don't know what Adams is doing here. It's like this is like the Eric Lindros and the Rick Nash situation kind of mashed into one.
Yeah.
Eichel gets an A prospect, a first-round pick, and maybe an extra first-round pick or B prospect with it.
Yeah. And at this point, if they keep dragging their feet on this and keep muddying the situation, you might see the value drop even more, especially if it doesn't look he's going to play at all this season. You only get the hype of getting Jack Eichel at this point, not necessarily the productivity.
Selfishly, I want to see him play because of the Olympics, because he would be a real asset for Team USA.
Exactly. And that's what's really wrecking this. He would easily slot in as, either your second line center or your third line center right now. Easily. But the problem is, this whole situation, he can't get surgery yet until he gets what he wants. And, Buffalo's not giving
what he wants.
Yeah. It's ridiculous at this point. But let's move away from, that sad detail. We're going to slowly start wrapping up this episode. We're going to talk about our question of the day, which our question of the day remains the same as always. Where does Buffalo finish in the Atlantic Division this year? So, Tom, let's start with you. Quick and easy. Where does Buffalo finish in the Atlantic Division this year?
8th. We pretty much delved into every reason why. I don't know if I can give anything else. I'm thinking 8th place right now. With the teams at the bottom, obviously you have your top 4 there in Tampa, Boston, Toronto, and Florida. You have Montreal, who's probably your guaranteed 5th. They're not as good as those teams, but they're better than the bottom 3. But right now, there's a blueprint in Ottawa, and there's a blueprint over in Detroit, which we'll speak about when we preview Detroit in a few days. There's just no blueprint, and Buffalo is kind of scrambled right now. It is. I think Ottawa's further along than Detroit, but at least they kind of have an idea of what they want to do. I just don't know what this team is doing.
Yeah, and that's what's frustrating the most for sure. Luke, where does Buffalo finish in the Atlantic Division?
Definitely, like Tom said, probably 8th. I'm hoping for a 7th. You're going to see Detroit probably fizzle out at some point, like they always do. They're just not quite there yet. And Ottawa, as long as they can sign Brady Tkachuk, they're going to be fine. They're going to be low-key under the radar, maybe fight in Montreal, try to get in that 5th. Whoever's on the cusp there at 4th, too. Boston might take a step back this year. So you'll see Ottawa, who knows? They're ragtag. They're young. They have a lot of potential on that team, but Buffalo's definitely not getting anywhere near anything.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I unfortunately agree with you guys. I mean, there's really not much worse right now than being a Buffalo Sabres fan. Maybe a Yankee fan right now at the moment, which, to me, I'm sad because I'm a Yankee fan. But this franchise is a mess, and they need to hit the reset button badly at the moment. And the sooner the Jack Eichel debacle is over, the better it will be for the franchise. Yet, as I stated before, I feel like this is just only the beginning. And because of that, 8th place for Buffalo right now. This team is going to be so distracted by this whole situation until it's finally over and done with. And, at least Buffalo still has the Bills. Now, if only the Coolers actually cared about the Sabres like they did the Bills. I think that's kind of the underlying, message that we're sending out here. Gula family, get on it, man. Care about this freaking franchise.
Anyone listening, go listen to the Frozen Four because we talk about that all the time. All the time. It's because McDermott and Bean took over with the Bills, and Bean was like, hey, I'm GM. I'm running this team. This is how it's going to go. We don't have a GM like that for the Sabres to be like, hey, I'm running this team, not you.
Yeah, Kevin Adams is not that type of person. If you had a person like Lou Lamoriello over with New York, I mean, maybe he would be the person to take the bull by the horns and be like, I know more than you.
I know a good GM that's available. His name is Jeff Gorton. He still should have a job, but he doesn't anymore.
That is true.
The other person that is pushing back, though, you'll see is Donnie Granato. He's playing the players where they should have been played the entire time. He's giving Jeff Skinner chances, gave Darlene chances last year. And that's why I low-key think Vinny Hinostroza has a very good year this year.
could very well happen. Actually, that's a player that I think could fly under the radar for Buffalo this year. And anybody that's looking for maybe a cheap pickup in fantasy, from time to time, maybe picking up in like an emergency situation for forwards, Vinny Hinostroza could actually be a very interesting pickup from time to time. Could be a person that, nets a couple points a night, especially on a weaker Buffalo team. But that being said, guys, as always, what do you guys think? Do you agree? Do you disagree with our takes? Make sure you comment down below. Let us know. And while you're there, drop a like and subscribe because, hey, you might not necessarily be a Buffalo Sabres fan, but we're covering all 32 teams leading up to the beginning of the season in October. And you got to make sure you check out our content, not only on YouTube, but also on IDsports.com. Not only can you find our team previews and our NHL content, the NFL season is in full swing, as well as the NCAA football season. You got to check out our NFL, NCAA football, MLS, and NBA coverage there as well. Give those guys some love. Check out their content there. It's awesome as always. And if you're on Twitter, make sure you follow us down below at I80_SportsNHL. And if you follow us already, thank you guys so much. We greatly value all of your support because without you guys, we can't do this on a weekly basis. And of course, Luke from FrozenFourPodcast, thank you guys so much, for always, being an awesome guest and always, having us on from time to time. Remind everybody where we can find you one more time, Luke.
Yeah, once again, thanks for having me on. It's so much fun talking with you guys. We've had you guys on a bunch. And you guys anyone listening can find us at Twitter at Frozen4Pod and on Instagram at the Frozen4 Podcast. I run the Twitter. Josh runs the Instagram. And we are on every streaming platform, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, everything. You can check us out there, the Frozen4 Podcast. It's a fun time, just a bunch of NHL news coming at you.
Heck yeah. And I can't recommend FrozenFourPodcast enough. You gotta make sure you check them out on Twitter. Check them out on all streaming platforms as well. They're always a fun listen, and they give great insight on all NHL news and aspects of the NHL as well. But it's time to move on from the Buffalo Sabres. It's time to move on to maybe greener and greater pastures in the Atlantic Division. But that's another story for another day. For now, I'm Brian. He's Tom. He's Luke. This has been another episode of Team Previews with, the NHL cast from I80 Sports.